So that piece of music I just played was my attempt at the intro to a song called Nimbus. And Nimbus was written and performed by Ralph Towner, and it appears on his 1973 recording, Solstice. I discovered Solstice probably around 1986 or 87 from a magazine called Guitar for the Practicing Musician, which I really liked a lot. And this particular issue of the magazine had to do with acoustic guitar, and one of the editors was interviewing Andy Summers of the Police, and he was asking him about particular pieces of music for acoustic guitar, and one of them was Nimbus. And just based upon how Andy Summers was raving about how great Ralph Towner was, I said, well, I better check this out. Got a copy of the album, and it's been one of my favorites ever since. I've owned probably 7 or 8 copies of the album over the years, just because I'll either wear it out or give it away. So what I want to do in this set of lessons is I'm going to go over, first of all, how Ralph Towner has his guitar tuned, because that was the key that I found out early on. I had no idea how he was making all of these notes on his 12-string guitar until it finally occurred to me. He's got his 12-string tuned in such a way that makes some of this stuff possible, because there's all of these close intervals and stuff that shouldn't be possible on traditional tuning. So I went on a quest to try and figure out what this tuning was, and I went so far as to get Paul McCandless's phone number. And I just out of the blue called him and left a message on his voicemail saying, hey, by any chance, do you know how Ralph Towner has his guitar tuned on Nimbus? And obviously I never got a call back. Eventually, though, I did find the information out online. And when I did find it out and started playing the guitar in this tuning, I realized that there is a lot of really deep theory that we can go into in analyzing what the tuning is. What are the 12 notes? What is a theory analysis of just those open strings? And then we're going to apply that theory to just the practical playing of the instrument. How can you use this tuning in kind of other kinds of settings other than this kind of music? And so we're going to start next by just looking at those 12 open string notes and concentrating on what those are and what that implies. C, C, E flat, G, B flat, C, F, D, A, G, D, D. So now let's look at these 12 notes and do some analysis along the way. We'll start by looking at each pair of notes, each course. So the first course, C and C. Pretty straightforward, they're an octave apart. But being that this is the bass note, we're going to analyze the rest of the 5 courses, assuming the key of C, so we can see how they all relate to each other. So the next pair, E flat and G. Now, if you have C, E flat, and G, you have a C minor triad. So, playing the first 2 courses together, you have a low C minor chord. Next 2, B flat and C, and then the key is C. That's the flat 7 and the 1. So, interestingly, you add that to the minor. We have our C minor 7. Okay, next pair of strings, F and D. Now this is interesting because it's in the key of C. It's the 2 being the D and the 4 being the F. So in chord theory, we can think of that as like a 6-9 maybe, or a 9 and 11. So color notes more than actual, straight ahead traditional chord tones. Next 2 is A and G. And in the key of C, that's our 5 and our 6. It's a natural 6. And then finally we have D and D at the top, which is, of course, the 2, the 9. So let's take some further analysis here, and let's look at the 6 low strings and the 6 high strings. So for each pair, let's look at the low note. C, G, C, and then D, G, D. So 1, 5, 1, 2, 5, 2. Or another way to think of it is a C power chord and a G power chord. So the 1 and the 5, the chords 1 and 5 stacked on top of each other. Now, if we look at the high pair on the high string on each pair, C, E flat, and B flat, F, A, and D. Now the interesting thing about that, F, A, D, if we raise them all a tone, it's G, B, E. It's just the top 3 strings in standard tuning. Only the F is an octave up. So for example, we could, any chord shape that would work over those top 3 strings would continue to be a chord for those 3 strings. Now, the other half of those courses could get in the way, but we'll do some analysis on that later. So let's go back to the idea, though, that we've got one chord on top of another chord based upon the 151 and 252 that we get from the bottom half. So we've already said before that open, the top 6 strings, the top 3, the low 3 courses, that makes up a C minor 7 chord. It's just right there. Now, what can we say about the top ones? Well, the D appears 3 times. And for the other 3 notes, what do we have? We have F, A, and G. So F, G, A, and D, what kind of chord can you make from just those 4 tones? Well, there's a couple of ways to think about it. You can think about it like so if these 3 notes on a standard tuning guitar is an E minor, then that's certainly a D minor. And then when you add that A into the mix, it basically becomes a D minor with a added 11th, a D minor add 11. But if we think of it instead as, using the G power chord that we get from this, if we think about it as a G chord instead, then what we get is a G sus2 add with a 7. So G7 sus2 or D minor add 11. So you can think of it as basically C minor over D minor or C minor over G sus2. That's the chords that we get from that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to improvise a small piece just using kind of bars and partial bars so that we can see how we can exploit these chords and partial chords to create compositions just using this particular tuning. So the interesting thing about what I just played there is that it's all based on a set of 4 chords. It's based upon this one, right? This one, this one, and this one. Now remember we said before that these bottom 6 strings, the bottom 3 choruses, make a C minor 7. And these top 3, you can think of them either as D minor with a 11 added, or you can think of them as G7 with a 9 added, G7 sus2, right? So let's just, what I did is I just used the combinations of both, because if this is D, then that completes that chord. But if this is D, then that completes the C minor, right? So, right, that's a D minor 11, and that's a C minor 11. But if these are G, then that completes the G minor 9, and that completes the C minor 9. So if you wanted to take a look at, you know, how we have all of it laid out, this is what the chords would be, right? So the only thing I did, right, and then transition to here, and then for the second set, and here. The only other thing I did is add some notes on the top. So that's all well and good if all you want to do is play minor things all the time, but you know, there's more to that than just playing minor things all the time. So how can you use this tuning to play other kinds of music? How can you use it to play bluesy sounding things or major sounding things? Well, that requires a little bit deeper analysis of what the notes are and what your possibilities are. Some things aren't really possible, but some things are. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do a small improv that's based on kind of a bluesy thing. And then when I'm done there, we will go over what it is that I did and how I learned to apply it to this tuning. So how was I able to do that? How was I able to take this big kind of pensive, open sounding sort of a thing and you know, make little happy little blues things out of it? Well, you know, it started with just an analysis. You know, as I said before, you know, this tuning wants to be minor, and it kind of fights you to try and find ways around it. So for example, so we got our 2 and our 4 in the F and the D on this, on the fourth set of strings, but you know, we can make that to 3 and 5 here. But if we just play it as a chord, we got a conflict because we got a minor third and a major third together. So the way that I got around that is I just skipped that string by finger picking just, you know, the low string and the fourth string together. And in fact, you see when I go up to the 4 for that same pattern, I don't bar right here. I just place my fingers here to make sure that even if I hit that string accidentally, I'm not going to bring in that minor third accidentally. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, like I said before, the intervals of the strings, right? Octave and unison, top and bottom. So it's basically unison and unison, right? That's a minor 6, which is an inversion of a major third. That's a minor third plus an octave, so third and third. And then here we've got dominant 7, which is an inversion of a whole tone, and we have a whole tone here. And the intervals are spaced apart such that if you voice them 3 frets apart, they become the same 2 sets of notes. So open string on the low string, open string on the 4th sets of strings, 2nd fret, and by virtue of this being open, we can get those same 2 notes here. Right? Now the interesting thing here is that in the chord, that's the 7 and the tonic. But if I lift my finger, it's the 5 and 6. So we have this interesting little thing that happens just by lifting off of the 3rd fret to let it go open. It all stays part of the chord, but it sounds like you're just doing a, even though this note comes from that string open, right? And then we have a melody string up at the top, and there's our major third there as well. And really that's the shape of a D chord. And it works well so long as you remember not to play that 5th course. And that was just a variation of that. So that's one kind of pattern that you can use. The other thing you can do to get to your 4, if you want to do like a minor to a major, it's just 2nd fret on that 5th string, that 5th set of strings, and the low 3 strings becomes the 4. So there you have it. There's a little bit deeper analysis into the Towner tuning, some of the ways that you can, learn to apply, sort of more traditional things to it. If you get deep into it, you can start to find your major 7th chords. And you can start to find, all kinds of things. Some things won't be possible because, by virtue of the fact that you have these close intervals all right next to each other. You can't play big giant stacks of 5ths and stuff, big giant open chords. It's going to have some density in the middle, and you're going to have to work around that. Sometimes you're going to want to change one of the 2 notes in such a way that the other one won't comply. So I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any comments, questions, anything else, and maybe I'll do a follow-up. Thanks.